Good morning and happy Tuesday. Hope everyone had a great Monday and is, setting the tone for the week. And we're going to be a little recruiting heavy focused as we have been talking about an enrollee in Isaac. Also talking about a guy who put Mizzou in his top schools, and looking at some recruiting as well as going to touch on the NFL draft a little bit. Our top guy, Zion Young. Going to talk a little about him and, kind of the chances that he has to actually make history for Mizzou. And so, let's talk about Essa Wittingberg. Also, we've been getting some pretty sick names recently. This is up there with the best of them. 6'3", 230-pound edge rusher. And so he actually made the trek all the way from Jersey to Missouri. If you guys don't know me, I'm actually from the East Coast as well, and so I made the trek to Missouri when I went to college there. So, very similar spots for us, except I'm not 6'3", 230 pounds and going to be a Division I athlete. I was 6'2", 200 and a average Mizzou student. But yeah, he was very impressed with what he saw at Mizzou. He talked about how, the highlights were definitely getting to meet the staff and see how they run their program, then seeing their coaching styles, what makes them different from other schools. This is all, looking at some articles from Power Mizzou and 247 Sports. They do good writing there, and some former Mizzou guys that I know as well. But he basically talked about how he got to talk to Chop Harbin. We have talked extensively about Chop Harbin and some of these new coaches that have been hired by Coach Drinkwitz and the impact that they've had on these recruits. Chop has had quite a large impact on Essa, it seems, and he's basically said that they're the type of coaches that put you in the position to make plays and not limit you. He basically said the big reason for his trip out there was basically the coaching staff and his relationship with them. He also has some family ties to the state. He says that, Mizzou has a great program and that his mom's side of the family is from the state of Missouri. He's in the process of setting up an official visit currently, working on a date. He has some other official visits scheduled. North Carolina State, Northwestern, Pittsburgh, Virginia, and Wake Forest. So no other SEC schools in there. So, hopefully they can lure him to Columbia, Missouri with the prospect of playing in that premier football conference and getting that experience and life in the SEC as well. So he's a top edge rusher, top 70 edge rusher, 3-star recruit, 87 rated on the composite and just the overall play rating on 247, also 3-star and on 3. Looking through stats, these are max prep stats. I take them with a little bit of a grain of salt. They are entered by the coaches. He rushed the ball for 119 yards and a touchdown, and that was in his junior season. In his junior season playing defense, he only played in 6 games, it appears, 23 total tackles with over 11 tackles for loss, so well over a tackle for loss per game. In his sophomore season, 31 tackles with 13 and a half tackles for loss in just 10 games. He also got 6 sacks his junior year in 6 games and 8 sacks his sophomore year in 10 games. So not exactly, take those with a grain of salt. They're max prep stats. It's all I could find, but those are the most accurate. That's what we have. So we're going to go with that. But yeah, it's a pretty sick name. And being an East Coast guy, we've seen that a couple times with quarterbacks coming out for Pennsylvania, but not that much with other players. But maybe Wittingberg can kind of change that and head over to Mizzou with that his one SEC official visit's likely to be Mizzou. Switching up to a guy who is enrolled with the Tigers. We talked a little about the tight end room and kind of how much Alex Atkins has kind of helped out this tight end room. But a guy, Isaac Jensen, basically a consensus 3-star recruit, number 8 player in the state of Nebraska by Rivals, top 20 tight end by a bunch of different outlets, and he had a lot of SEC offers and chose Mizzou over LSU, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Florida State, A&M. So a lot of schools in the SEC that wanted his services, and he chose to be a Missouri Tiger. 70 receptions for over 1,250 yards and 24 touchdowns in his junior and senior seasons combined. Also played basketball, as you'd expect. That's a very, very common thing for these guys. 6'6", 225. Very kind of excited to see what he ends up doing as time goes on. So yeah, 6'6", 225 out of Millard South High School. In Omaha, the Omaha, Nebraska area, I guess I should say. And so, yeah, it's one of those tight ends we'll keep an eye on. In basketball, he averaged 13 points per game his sophomore season, along with 6.5 rebounds. He played in 22 games that year, didn't play in that many his junior season, and of course did not participate in his senior season of high school basketball because he enrolled early at Mizzou for the chance to get that experience, which is something we see a lot more recently, especially, a lot of the players that we've talked about, I kind of try and specify the players that we do profiles on, the freshmen, whether they're enrollees or signees, those kind of things. So I think that's also important to keep an eye on is, what's really the big difference there and what does that, extra few months of being in an SEC, kind of environment and practicing in the SEC kind of do to help those guys. There's not exactly like a written study about it or all that stuff. But, doing some research, you can kind of see that those guys that do enroll early, do have a better chance of getting on the field early. But, also kind of depends on, how they perform. The 5 stars that enroll early may not be as good as a 4-star that comes in the summer and really tries to prove himself. So it's all a bunch of different stuff, but it'd be really interesting to look at, what kind of that correlation is between early enrollees and the amount of playing time they get or how early they play. But let's talk about the NFL draft because it's coming up, and I'm excited about the chance of seeing some Mizzou guys get drafted. The thing with the Missouri Tigers, the past 2 years, they have had a first-round pick. Zion Young, if he does end up being a first-round pick, will have 3 first-round picks in 3 straight years for the first time since 2009 to 2011. Also, very, very nice for Eli Drinkwitz to kind of tell his players, oh yeah, we've had first-round picks 3 straight years. Hasn't happened during his time, of course. 09 to 11 was well before Eli Drinkwitz's time at Mizzou, but still make an impact nonetheless. And Zion Young, of course, had that massive, massive 2025 campaign. I'm seeing a lot of people saying he's going to be a late first-round guy. I think he falls in that category, but I also think he could maybe, what's late first round? You got mid first round is kind of like 12 to like 24, I'd say, and then late is 25 to 32. So I think he could also go in that 24-25 range, which is kind of a gray area between mid and late, but teach their own. I think that he's going to be a phenomenal prospect, and whoever does draft him is going to get a heck of a guy who's very motivated. We definitely saw that in the Auburn game. I love talking about that. It's so cool. But yeah, 42 total tackles this past season, 20 of those solo, 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 16.5 tackles for loss. First team All SEC guy. That first team All SEC recognition is something that people really don't. You shouldn't take lightly. Like, you're competing against, still like quite literally NFL players every Saturday, which of course, NFL plays on Sundays, but in the SEC, you compete against NFL players every Saturday from top to bottom. Florida wasn't great this year. They got, of course, cream of the crop NFL guys. LSU wasn't that good. Cream of the crop NFL guys. Every single Saturday, you're playing against those cream of the crop NFL guys in the SEC. Even Alabama had a down year. Like, they got blown out by Indiana. But I think that top to bottom, that's why the SEC is the best conference, because you don't really see the kind of talent, that there's a shrunk talent gap in some other conferences, but the SEC, you got those top to bottom. Florida gets 5-star guys every year, and so thinking about that as well. But for Zion Young, I'm very excited about the chance for him to kind of prove himself wherever he does land, and hopefully make it 3 straight first-round picks for Mizzou, and help out Eli Drinkwitz when he's recruiting. And hey, it's pretty nice to have that as well. But very excited about the chance for Zion to get drafted. According to ESPN, he's a number 29 overall prospect and the number 5 edge rusher. That's 6'5", 262 pounds. It's basically like a prototypical defensive end, so I'd love to see him. Finishing off today's episode, talking about Kingston Miles, a guy we have not talked about at all, but a state of Missouri guy, a running back, ranked number 4 player in Missouri in the 2027 class out of St. Mary's High School in St. Louis. So he's has Mizzou in his top 7. His top 7 does include Alabama, Auburn, Kansas State, Kentucky, Mizzou, of course, Tennessee, and USC. So they kind of were late to his recruiting process, but they found themselves in this top 7 group. Curtis Looper did offer Miles to come visit a game in November. He couldn't make it back to campus, but they did get a scholarship done over the phone. So he does have that offer, of course, with Mizzou being in his top 7. He actually came to the Alabama game in October, which was less said about that one, the better. But did come for a spring practice and then another official visit. So a top 20 running back in terms of, on three, a top 22 running back in terms of 247. So he's a very, very strong guy. Miles said that it felt very different. As engaging, catching up, and that talking to Coach Drink and offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey, that they had great conversations. So it'll be really interesting to see what this kind of looks like for him. As a junior, ran for over 2,000 yards with 26 touchdowns, averaging about 8 yards per carry. Also caught 12 passes for 236 yards and a touchdown, and played defense, 62 tackles, 10 of those for loss, a sack, and a fumble recovery as a junior. Those are some insane stats. So he had previously announced that he would be going to take a trip to Colorado. Didn't do that. He was going to go to Wisconsin. He's not going to do that. But quite literally, he basically has said that if feel like we won't, it'd be just so. My son Johnson Cook, who we've talked about from East St. Louis, might not be a Tiger, but a pretty funny quote was basically Miles said that it felt like if we both were there, it'd be just like Jamal and Ahmad Hardy. So that's awesome stuff. So he'll be coming to Mizzou in the middle of June after his trip to Auburn, but we'll be kind of keeping track on this. And I love that quote with him saying, with another recruit, oh, we could be the next Ahmad Hardy, Jamal Roberts duo. So, kind of lists that in-state motivation as well. So yeah, that'll do it for today's episode. MIZ.